Hey, folks, welcome back to Untitled Africa. This is Chris coming to you live from central Pennsylvania once again. Hey, listen, if you're here and you've overcome the YouTube suppression algorithm, welcome. Happy to have you along for the ride. Yeah, no, see YouTube playing games again this morning. Several devoted viewers have been unsubscribed, not through their own action, but because YouTube's algorithm is unsubscribing people. So my apologies if you didn't get the notification. We put it on social media networks to let you know that the stream is on. But I'm excited today to have a guest we're going to have on here. My first Australian. Wow. I haven't had any Australians on here. Crikey. Anyway, so we'll get started on that in just a moment here with my guest, who's a rugby player. And he's still a rugby player. We've had a lot of Oaks on here who are former rugby players, retired rugby players. But this gentleman plays for Rugby United New York, which is my favorite franchise in Major League Rugby. It's kind of odd for me, being a person who's not a fan of New York sports franchises, to be a fan of a New York sports franchise. But I am. Ever since RUNY was announced, I've been really excited when they signed Mike Petrie, and the list went on from there. Ben Foden, got really excited about this team. I've been to a lot of their games, and they're pretty exciting. They're exciting out of the gate. And we've had 3 seasons in Major League Rugby. Of course, this one was an abbreviated season courtesy of Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19, which kind of ended the season after 5 games. But we're looking forward to 2021. The schedule's been announced. The season runs from the 20th of March until August. So I'm not sure how that's going to work because the league was really set up so it didn't compete with other major events like baseball, but we'll see. One good sign for this is that people in New York and Toronto don't have to worry about playing in the ice and snow anymore. So with that, folks, let me welcome my guest here. My guest is Harry Bennett from Rugby United New York. There he is. How's it going, Harry?
Chris, great to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. Listen, I got to say, I like the top you got on there.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're going pretty aggressively into winter right now, so anything to keep me warm at the moment, so that's good.
All right, I kind of let the cat out of the bag. Clearly, you're not from Appalachia with that accent, so you are from Australia, from the land down there. So, am I correct? Are you from Sydney area, or is that falsely reported in the news? You can never trust the news anymore.
No, I originally grew up in the Hunter Valley, which is a rural area about 3.5 hours north of Sydney, but I did all my schooling, education and life after school in Sydney before I moved over to the States. So I probably spent a bit over half my life in Sydney, so pretty close.
But you did grow up in a rural area. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
All right, so was that on a farm, a ranch, or something like that?
Yeah. So we don't call them ranches in Australia. They're called properties or farms or stations.
Stations,
the one that I grew up on was a cattle station. So that's still in the family as well. So yeah, it's good to sort of have that balance growing up with the farm life and the city life and the beach life, which was good.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. English is not English is not English. Your English is not the same as our English. And of course, we have I have a large South African audience, and they speak a strange English all on their own. If you're familiar with that, have you heard them use the term robot before?
I have not heard that one, but I have quite a few South African friends, obviously through the rugby network as well. So certainly as much slack they probably give us Aussies for the slang words we use, they've got enough on their own as well.
Oh, they do. In fact, the robot specifically is the first time I was driving in South Africa. I'm driving along and painted on the street in the city, it said robot ahead. And I'm like, R2-D2? Where's he at? No, actually, a robot to the South Africans is a traffic signal.
There you go.
There you go. So everyone's got their own version of English. And then don't even get started on India. Boy, talking to Indians when they speak English, they've got their own words for everything. So,
yeah.
Okay, Ronaldo Jose, who's a YouTube personality and award counselor for the Democratic Alliance in Nelson Mandela Bay, is being cheeky. He says, what do you call a sheep tied to a pole in Australia? Unfortunately, he's an Afrikaans speaker, so he spelled pole incorrectly. He spelled pole as in an election pole, not a pole you tie something to. So we're going to disregard Ronaldo. Okay, thanks a lot for playing, Ronaldo. Anyway, so what was that like for you growing up at a station? I mean, I grew up on a farm for part of my youth. I had a dairy farm. I milked cows. That sucks, by the way, Harry. 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 every night. I mean, it's not a lot of fun. I mean, it built character. I learned the value of hard work, and I don't regret it. I'm glad it was part of my life, but couldn't have seen myself doing that rest of my life. But what's a cattle station like?
Yeah, very similar. I'm glad that you touched on that. Obviously, you don't appreciate it in the moment, but looking back on those little life lessons and skills, it certainly, put you in good stead for future life. But my experiences personally, I was pretty fortunate that I come from a very close and big family. I have one sibling, but I have a lot of cousins, and we all live in the similar area as well. So it was a lot of fun. We were always on adventures out in the great outback of Australia, or ranching cattle, or herding cattle as they call it, which was a lot of fun. Horse riding was a big part of my upbringing as well. So, we weren't short of an activity or two growing up. And I think that also lended to the sporting field, whatever it was. There was plenty of competition within the family from all generations to give us that sort of competitive edge and build on our skills growing up. So, yeah, I loved it.
Well, I know that horseback riding is definitely part of Australian culture. I mean, listen, I've watched McLeod's Daughters endlessly.
Oh God, that's funny.
Well, it's interesting because when I was younger, we've always had this strong U.S. and Aussie connection, and even in culture, a lot of things came across. And I obvious, Crocodile Dundee, Men at Work, those are obvious things. Olivia Newton-John, we still love her, but it's there's much more than that. Of course, she's really English, not Australian, but we'll let you guys have her. So
there you go.
but there's other things, that it's always been there. But for me of late, I have not seen those cultural links as often. So let me ask you, as an Australian coming to the States, do you still see those ties culturally between Australia and the U.S., other than obvious English and Anglo-Saxon culture that are predominant? But I mean, do you see other things? We used to have all these Hollywood and musical things that were very much in common, and a lot of Americans grew up, hearing about Australia, but I don't see that much anymore. Is that something I'm missing?
It's a good question. It's probably something I haven't put a lot of thought to, just taking for granted that I've been in the States for quite some time now. And I will say, where I am in New York, there's certainly a big Aussie presence here. I think obviously it's natural that you find each other because of those cultural similarities. But, there's certainly enough here that I think that maybe the New Yorkers are probably getting a little bit sick of us, to be honest. I think for me, first coming to America, I lived in LA for 2 years, and there was a lot of similarities in the lifestyle and the cultures of West Coast, California, and Sydney, Australia, from the beach, the warm weather, all those things. And then probably from just like a pop culture perspective, there's a lot more Aussie celebrities sort of making their way over in the US now. So again, I think there's more similarities and understandings from the US market in terms of Australian culture. I think the greatest thing that's happened to me since the 5 years of being here, I'm getting asked less and less about those sort of idiosyncrasies of Aussie culture. And the one phrase that I'm glad I'm not hearing as much of anymore is shrimp on the barbie. So
yeah, that was kind of overdone when it came out, hearing that all the time. So yeah, I think it's probably blended so much now that when people go to Outback Steakhouse, they don't even get the it's not a real link to Australia, but the intended link to Australia. They're probably like, oh, let's just go for steak to Outback. They probably, it's from Tennessee, something like that. Yeah, that is interesting. Now, Ronaldo did ask a real good question here. He did say it must feel, or well, not question, but a statement. He says it must feel quite crazy coming from wide open spaces in the Outback, and then you're in New York City, where skyscrapers everywhere. It's all jammed in, 9 million people in just a tiny space. That's got to be different. Of course, you've been in LA, which is a big city too, but that's kind of spread out. It's all over the place. So if you're in Manhattan, it's just right on top of you. What is that like? That's got to be a big change for someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, I think regardless of where you come from, coming into New York City, it's the concrete jungle, right? So it does take some time to get used to. For me, I guess that slow transition from growing up in the Outback and then going to school in Sydney and getting city life exposed to me early on, it wasn't too big of a transition. But again, it's just, as I said, I think moving anywhere and coming to New York City and trying to ground your feet pretty quickly, it takes a while. So there's certainly all those cliche remarks about New Yorkers that certainly resonate with anyone that's spent enough time here.
No, let me assure you, Harry, those stereotypes about New Yorkers are all true.
Yeah.
They're all true. Well, I mean, there's 9 million people. You'll find somebody that fits the stereotype of a New Yorker. You just walk around Times Square long enough, you're bound to run into somebody like that, or Central Park for that matter. Yeah, no, it definitely has to be, I imagine, a bit of a change. I'm going to date myself a little bit here. I don't usually do that, but usually since I started growing this beard since I retired from the Army last year, I actually look older than I am now. I used to look younger, but I'm going to date myself. Back in the day, I used to watch Return to Eden, which was an Australian soapy that was a big deal. I mean, do you even know that show?
No idea.
Okay, so it was massive in the 80s. Shh, don't tell anybody. Anyway. But I mean, we could even get that in U.S. programs back then. It was so good. But I've always, Kylie Minogue. Oh, so I love Kylie Minogue. So does the gay community. She's huge in the gay community. She's like a gay icon. I haven't never figured that one out because she's not gay, but they love her music. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, the gay mate. Yeah, we had enough of that too. We've seen enough of that too. But hey, so you grew up. When did you start playing rugby? I mean, was it something that was from you hit the ground and you picked up a ball, or was it something you're introduced to? Because here in the U.S., a lot of folks don't find out about it until they're already in high school or something like that. That's a bit late to start a sport. So when did it start for you?
Yeah, pretty much day one. My dad and all my uncles played rugby throughout their lifetime, some at a pretty high level as well. And there was always an element of sport and athletics in our family, rugby being the main one. So I can't remember exactly when it happened, but the Wallabies back in the 90s were a pretty amazing force to be reckoned with. And I remember my dad putting on a VCR tape recording of a Bledisloe Cup match between the All Blacks and the Wallabies when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And I think Jason Little may have scored a try right off the kickoff. And I think after that, my dad said, I've just signed you up for youth rugby down at the local rugby club, and hit the ground running at age six or so. And yeah, haven't looked back. I loved every minute of it.
Well, let's be absolutely clear about something. I mean, you don't know this about me, Harry, but I detest the All Blacks with a passion I reserve only for certain political people around the world. But I'm not a fan of the All Blacks, never have been. I respect them, But I do have to ask this question. It's a bit of a cheeky one. So, I mean, do Australians even remember what the Bledisloe Cup looks like? I mean, I haven't had it in a long time.
Well, I mean, we know what it looks like because it's flaunted in front of our faces every year it comes out. But probably the touch and feel of it might be a little bit foreign at the moment. But yeah, certainly an aspiring bit of trophy to put in the cabinet for any Australian. It's the one we look forward to most every year. And it's funny, every year you come in with high hopes and expectations, and unfortunately the All Blacks just seem to pull it out. And I don't know, it seems to be a format that's difficult to win as a team trying to reclaim it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, any team that goes to New Zealand knows that that's a tough ask, and to beat the All Blacks twice, one there and then one in Australia, is almost impossible. So I like the new format that it's now 3 to 4 games, which probably gives us more of an opportunity.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I think a 2-match thing it should have always been at least 3. I mean, best of 3, and then if you wind up with a draw, then you have to have an icebreaker. But if one team wins one, the other, and then you got a draw, you have to figure it out. But 3, I think, is better at least. 2 was always seemed kind of artificial to me. And some of these things that between countries comes down to just one test match, and that's kind of tough. Now, Ronaldo says, who would you rather face, assuming you're playing for the Wallabies, the Springboks or the All Blacks?
Well, good question.
It is a good question.
Right now, probably. I mean, based off reputation of 2019, obviously the Springboks, their physicality is second to none, and that's what got them to the title. So, if they had the same form going into that, then you'd take the All Blacks every day of the week. And being a fly half, I think I'd much prefer the All Blacks right now than that forward pack of the Springboks just coming into my channel every day.
Yeah, that's kind of an intimidating sight as you charge up the field. I think that playing on the left wing, I'd be happy to offload if I saw that coming at me. You wouldn't see me making many cuts across the middle of the pitch. I'd kind of stick to the side to get away from that. That's pretty crazy. I tell you, the 2019, I was in Japan for the World Cup. I went to 17. I had tickets for 18 games, but I lost a game because of Typhoon Hagibis. The Italians against the All Blacks was my one game I missed. But so it's still personal best, 17 games in a World Cup. I've been to the last 8 World Cups. That's not the last 8 iterations. That's from 2011, New Zealand, men, women, sevens, all of them. But,
amazing.
Oh, yeah, no, I went to New Zealand 2011. I was in Paris in 2014 for the women. I was in England 2015 for the men. I was in Northern Ireland for the women in 2017, San Francisco for the sevens in 2018, and Japan 2019. Yeah, so it was pretty amazing, pretty cool stuff. But that was amazing to watch the World Cup in Japan. I don't know, did you get a chance to see that or go to it at all, or was that at
I wasn't able to get over there myself personally, but tried to watch every game I possibly could while I was there. And obviously the reports you hear back from it, that the Japanese community just did an amazing job on and off the field, and anyone that was there as a spectator or a player just said it was unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it was unbelievable. The Japanese put on an amazing World Cup, and it's really a shame that right on the heels of that we have COVID, because all
Yeah.
that momentum is gone now, and not just for not just for the World Cup or World Rugby and rugby as a sport, but also for the Springboks who aren't even playing Test right now. I mean, between the Eagles and Springboks, I'm at a loss. I guess I'm gonna have to root for Georgia or something, because by the time those two teams get on the pitch, we're gonna get slaughtered.
Yeah, there you go. So do we give the Springboks a little bit of an asterisk then, just based on not playing any rugby over the last 12 months?
You mean if you want to talk about for their number one ranking in the world rankings right
Yeah.
now? Sure, I'd give them an asterisk. I mean, that's fair. I mean, they haven't played. I mean, how can you retain the title when you haven't played? That seems like an unfair system. I'm just
All right.
saying. I'm. You should know up front, I'm a Springboks fan. There was no national side in the U.S. when I became a rugby follower back in 83, 82, 83.
Yeah.
So I became a Springboks fan. Have stuck with them. I follow the Eagles, of course. I'm a huge Eagles fan. But then, when they play the Springboks, it's already a done deal before it starts. So can't get too excited about that. But okay, so you played in Australia growing up, and then you took a shot at Super Rugby. I think you were in the Waratahs Academy for a while. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. Straight out of school, I did 2 years in the academy, and then moved into the extended squad for that, which was pretty amazing. Unfortunately for my physical development, I was 74 kilos wringing wet, coming straight out of school. And I think I kind of attributed a little bit to cricket as well. My shoulders probably weren't where they needed to be, and I ended up getting spat out of the back of the program there with, I think, 3 shoulder surgeries over a 3-year span.
Ouch.
So that was pretty disappointing, but during my time there, it was unbelievable. And I think one of the most eye-opening experiences I've had to date was my very first game after leaving school was a pre-season trial game for the Waratahs against the Brumbies, and facing off as a 18-year-old against Matt Tamua, Adam Ashley Cooper, and the likes of those guys for the Brumbies was pretty amazing. So certainly a fond memory, even though we didn't get the result.
Yeah, but those 3 shoulder injuries, that really had to be a massive personal setback and very frustrating. Not to mention quite painful, I would imagine. And the rehab, I take it that was quite long each time you went through that.
Yeah, so it's typically about a 5 to 6 month recovery rate from day of surgery to getting back on the paddock. It's funny, hindsight's an amazing thing. And at 18 years old and you have a surgery and you're looking towards year 19, year 20 and trying to commit to a professional rugby contract and things don't turn out, you throw your arms in the air and think it's completely over. Where, 25, 26 years old, there's still those opportunities, and just having patience to be able to trust the process and commit to it is something that I probably lacked, and I think any teenager in that situation would at the time. So it was tough. It was frustrating. Certainly some dark days, but a learning experience as much as it was everything else as well.
But you did move on from that. You played sevens at some point, or you gave it a stab, didn't you? And then how did that go? And tell us a little about your sevens experience, because it's a very different game. You got the right build for sevens, that's for sure. But although any size can play sevens, Mano Noah has proven that. But so how did that go, and how did you get into sevens?
Yeah, so it was sort of around the same time as I was with the Waratahs. They sort of still do it now, but the Australian Sevens program was sort of used as a development pathway for the younger guys to get some professional exposure to then go into either top-level Super Rugby stuff. So because of my body type and my style of play, that was an opportunity for me to go into that program. And I did some domestic competitions with the extended squad there, and that was coming off the back of, I think, shoulder surgery 2. And basically the week before the Aussie program was going into their full camp for the IRB 7 circuit for that year, we were playing a invitational tournament up on the Gold Coast. And I think it was in the final, we were playing, I think, the New Zealand or the Fijian international invitational side. I went in to make a tackle and blew my shoulder out again. So as quickly as it started, it stopped pretty abruptly as well. So, short-lived, but amazing nonetheless.
Yeah, and I have to admit that I don't ever want to play against Fijians. Those they look like tree trunks when they come at you, and they hit hard. I mean, even the small guys, they're just wow. I've been to a number of HSBC sevens tournaments, and yeah, whenever the Fijians come out there, no matter who they're playing, I just kind of sit back and go, okay, how's it going to go? Because they can be terrible, but usually when they're terrible, it's because they're making mistakes. They're making mental mistakes in the game. But when they're on their game and they're on form, those guys are tough. And I thought we had it. The USA Sevens, I thought we had the title 2 years ago. I thought we were going to pull it out. We led the whole season, made the first team ever to make it every semifinal we got to. And then Fiji just came and roared back and took the title. So USA finished second in sevens. But still, it was pretty exciting stuff. Sevens is a fun game. Have you heard about tens? Have you seen that?
Yeah, so obviously the Bermuda tens that just was over there, a couple of weeks ago now. Tens rugby back in Australia was very much more of a social element. It was just grassroots rugby and certainly more social off the field than it was quality rugby on the field. So I dabbled with it a little bit back home, but never really saw it as anything more than that. Curious about the concept and how it would play out with the Bermuda stuff and looking into this World Series. And by all reports and just seeing what was on TV the last couple of weeks, it seemed like a pretty good success. So it's funny. You think 15s is very much, forwards and backs and set piece orientated and strategy and all this stuff. And sevens is a lot more free flowing. You're looking at athletes and where does 10 sort of fall in between? Is it more 7 centric or 15 centric? And I think it's trying to figure out that balance within your squad to be able to play the best way. And, the teams that played well in Bermuda certainly got that balance right.
Yeah, it was interesting for me. I paid attention to it because Bram van Straten, the former Springbok, was a guest on my channel, and he mentioned he was putting a team together. So I was curious. So I watched it, and for me it was different. I'd never really been introduced to tens before. The Bermuda tens was interesting, but their Jeopardy kick or whatever they want to call it, where you can try that. What a concept! I mean, I'm not sold on it, but it was interesting that you get a try and you can make a conversion attempt for another 5 points. You can get 10 points out of a try. Interesting. So it definitely it has an impact on the game because unlike sevens, where so many guys just try to get across the try line and they wind up way off on the edge, and then most of the conversion kicks are missed, and that costs you a game. And coaches are constantly, like Mike Friday, screaming, "Get under the post! Get under the post!" It won't matter in the tens because with that rule, you can just pick your spot and go for 1, 2, or 5 points. I think it's an interesting aspect of the game. I found that to be. I don't know. Did you watch the Bermuda tens at all?
Yeah, I did. I think it certainly highlighted the value of having a good kicker in your squad as well. Guys like Will Maggie and Ben Seamer certainly were pretty accurate with their kicking over there as well. Notoriously good kickers. So yeah, it's where you value. I think also going into the depths of the game and realizing strategy in terms of how many points are required and where you sort of set yourself up for that certainly plays into it. So being a good mathematician might help as well.
That's I'm done. I guess tens is out for me. Not my strong suit, math. You too, huh? But I found it interesting too because we saw some 7 stars like Cecil Africa, and we saw Dan Norton playing there. Unfortunately, England has folded up their sevens team, was what I heard. But Dan Norton was there. Cecil Africa was there. That was amazing. And then we also saw some of your teammates there. Ben Foden played for the London Royals, and I think Dylan Fawcett's with RUNY right now, isn't he? Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dylan also played. He played for the Ohio Aviators, who I was rooting for. I went to high school and college in Ohio, so I was pulling for them.
There you go.
Yeah, but it was pretty interesting, the tens. But yeah, I found that to be quite. I don't know. Maybe it'll have its appeal, maybe it won't. But it was definitely interesting to see a mix of 7 stars and 15 stars on the pitch at the same time. But I was a little bewildered about, it seemed like the strategy of a few teams was a little confused. But Ohio had a nice rolling maul, which was impressive. It was nice to see that you can do that in the tens game. I wasn't sure because in sevens that's not something you can do, but it really works great in tens. But anyway, so that's kind of cool stuff. So you had these injuries and you gave it a go at sevens. You got injured again. So your shoulder was letting you. Was it both sides or was it one side that kept getting the hits?
Yeah. So to date, I've had 2 each shoulder.
Oh gosh. So you've had 4 now.
Okay. Yeah, I've had 4 now. People probably question why I'm still playing and everything like that, but I guess the silver lining is each one I had I learned something new about how to improve my rehab and my process to be able to get myself back on the pitch. So by the time I had my fourth one, again, this is ridiculous that I'm saying that, the recovery rate was a lot faster, and I've come back better than certainly the previous ones. But yeah, it's been a rocky road for sure.
No doubt, but here you're back and you're playing, and there's a lot of rugby opportunities around the world, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I mean, people talk about, there's lots of opportunity in Japan these days. There's people for opportunities with Premier League and with pro rugby, or not pro rugby, but
Pro 14.
Yeah, 14s. Thank you. Yeah, I'm confusing the defunct American league. So the Guinness Pro 14. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So there's that. You've got the French league, which is pretty big, and those are leagues that actually people can make a living off of. They're lucrative. They're long established. So those are opportunities. But you found yourself in the U.S., and I suspect you're probably wondering if you're going to ever get a chance to really get back in rugby. And then Major League Rugby comes along. But before that, I think you got involved with the New York Athletic Club at some point, didn't you?
Yeah, so after all those surgeries back home in Australia and not having the success that I hoped for, I thought it'd be a good idea to sort of clear the head, do some traveling. A lot of my friends at a younger age had done some travel overseas, and I never got the opportunity. I always had my eyes set on America. I'm a big fan of American sports over here, and I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to start fresh, do a couple months over here traveling, see the States, and then head back home and have another crack at it. But within probably 2 months of being in America, I realized how much I was loving it over here, and opportunities came my way to be able to make myself stay here a little bit long term. And it's sort of been that way ever since. So I'm 5 years into, almost 6 years into being in America now. And I've been super fortunate that, those opportunities have come my way, and I've been able to stay here and make it work.
Well, I have to say this, it's just amazing. I mean, I've lived in Los Angeles, so the fact that you came to America, you were in Los Angeles, and you still like America, that's incredibly impressive. So I'm very happy for that. I wouldn't have sent you to LA for
like a true East Coaster.
No, I'm not an East Coaster. I've lived all over the country. I've lived in about 38 of the lower 48 states at one point or another in my lifetime. So, all over the place. But no, LA's fine. I like to tease LA because it's easy to tease the place. You can't breathe. You can't drive safely. You can't shop. Anyway,
there you go.
No, but seriously, no, I'm just kidding. But it's great that you. But you're right. There's a lot of similarities: the weather, the climate, the culture, the beach life, all that stuff. That is like the South Coast there of Australia quite a bit. So I could see that. I could see why people would be into it. I'm more of a mountain person, forest. So I get into the Alps and that sort of thing. So New Zealand has some affinity for me. Not the All Blacks, New Zealand. Make sure we're clear about that. But so New York Athletic Club, how'd that come about? Because that's a lot of people who are not in the U.S. audience have probably never heard of the New York Athletic Club, and maybe even people out of the Mid-Atlantic have never heard of it. But it's an important organization. It's been around a long time. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it was about the same time as. So I did the first and only year of pro rugby. I was contracted to Sacramento, which was eye-opening experience for anyone that was involved in it. I think the biggest thing you can say about that was it allowed a blueprint for MLR to be what it is today, and probably take the lessons of what not to do. At that same time, I was 2 years into being into America, and the residency rule at the time is 3 years before you can represent that country. I was contacted by Mike Tolkien, who was the current Eagles coach at the time, who was also strong affiliation with the New York Athletic Club, coaching there as well. And he said that if there was any interest in me coming over to the East Coast and doing a season or two with New York Athletic Club, with the intention of, getting to my 3-year residency to be able to compete at an Eagles jersey. And I jumped at the opportunity for obviously a handful of reasons. One being, it was an amazing historical club, and probably at the time the best amateur club in the country. Mm-hmm. An amazing reputation of how many Eagles that it's produced over the years as well. I think anyone that's played at that high level has had some sort of touch point with New York Athletic Club. And then also just the appeal of being in New York City. I'd never done that before. I'd never traveled to the East Coast at that time. And as soon as I got here, it was an amazing experience. We had an amazing squad put together, and this was the year between pro rugby and MLR started. So it was at the time the highest level of rugby in the US, competing with Old Blue, who had a lot of Eagles in it. And my current forwards coach at RUNY, Mathieu, was the head coach at Old Blue. So there was certainly a strong tie and rivalry between those two clubs in New York. And, just, I guess, spending that 6 months in New York playing for the athletic club certainly solidified my intent to stay here longer and try and make it work as much as I could. So I'm still a part of that club, been there with them ever since. And, I'm extremely fortunate and grateful for everything that they've done for me over the time that I've been in New York, because as anyone knows, in New York, it's an absolute slog, and any help and support that you can get, particularly within the rugby community, is worthwhile.
Well, it's interesting you should mention Mike Tolkien, because I've just put a picture up on the screen there of Mike Tolkien and I at Coney Island for that first season. It was actually, I think it might even been the first game, I'm trying to remember, that Rugby United played at home there in Coney Island. So I've got the same jacket on that you've got right there, and Mike's got a nice weather jacket on there. He's a great guy. I really it was great to see him as USA coach. He was there at an earlier time. And now we've seen a lot of success, fortunately, with Gary Gold. Pretty excited about that. So I'm guessing that's how you got to RUNY, as maybe that connection through the New York Athletic Club, and then Mike Tolkien kind of got you the RUNY. So, yeah. Now, okay, maybe you can answer this question before we go a little further. But before we do that, folks, you're listening to Chris White Africa on the Indaba Africa channel right here on YouTube. My special featured guest today is Harry Bennett. No, that's not an Appalachian accent. That's not a Midwest accent. He's actually a genuine Australian. He's with us. My first ever Australian on the program, so we're pretty excited about that. But he lives in New York, and he plays for Rugby United New York from Major League Rugby. What I didn't know is he just told me he played for Sacramento in Pro Rugby, which was America's first professional rugby league. It lasted just a single season. And what Harry probably doesn't know is that I drove 6 hours to go to Ohio for the final Pro Rugby game between Colorado and the Ohio Aviators, just to watch that game. And in that game, Ohio won the game, but if they had made a conversion at the end of the game, they would have won the unofficial league title, because there was no championship game, because they would have had the points. But because they missed the conversion kick, Colorado de facto won. They won the championship. But I didn't really play for Sacramento. Pro Rugby was exciting. I was all stoked for it. But as I understood it, one guy owned the whole league, and there were issues between USA Rugby and Pro Rugby, and it just kind of folded up after a season. But I think you made a good point. A lot of the lessons that Major League Rugby has learned, early lessons, came from what didn't work and what didn't work with Pro Rugby. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, massive. And obviously, speaking off air prior to this, if you do get Steve Lewis on, he's certainly a good person to touch on those points, because he was instrumental in terms of getting Pro Rugby off the ground.
Now, that I didn't realize either. So that's a good talking point, because Steve will be on the channel. We've been talking about it for a while, but I was distracted. My mother passed away this week, so I hadn't been back.
Sorry to hear that.
No, thank you for that. But so I'll get back with Steve, and we'll get him on here, and that'll be great to talk a little bit about Pro Rugby, because not a lot of people know about it. But anyway, so let's jump ahead a little bit from there. And so Major League Rugby, third season just happened. We lost the season. That was a huge disappointment for me. You guys at Rugby United New York, you had a fascinating squad. I mean, you're on the team. Cathal Marsh is there from Ireland. You've got Ben Foden from England. You've got Mathieu Bastareaud, who was on loan for a year, coming over from France. And a lot of other, Dylan Fawcett, a lot of Mike Petrie, of course, a longtime Eagle, lots of fascinating players on that team. And I was really excited about this season. And then 5 weeks in, that's it. Corona takes the season away. Did you guys have any feeling, or did you kind of see the handwriting on the wall as we got to that stage that maybe the season was going to be canceled?
I think, like most people, it was sort of just reading the terrain and trying to make the best judgment call as it was happening. I remember it clearly. We were going into playing Seattle Seawolves at home. I think it was going to be our first home game of the season. And obviously a big one, because Seattle had won the 2 previous titles. And we got close last year, but they beat us in a nail-biter. So, all our focus was towards that game. And as the week, it was literally day by day. As the week was getting on, it was like in communication with the leadership group and the coaches, and coaches trying to, because again, there was no blueprint or protocol as to what was to happen. It was basically a gut decision and sort of getting a feel from players. So, our coaches were literally asking us, how do you feel? Do you feel comfortable considering what's going on around the world? Do you think it's in our best interest that we train together as a squad? Like, how do you feel? All these questions. And then it sort of came down to the Friday evening, the day before we were supposed to play Seattle, that there were spiked cases over in Seattle that they had to pull out of the game. And then the following week, obviously everything hit the fan. And I think it might have been the NBA that came out with a statement saying that they were going to cancel the rest of their season. And it was basically domino effect for any other sporting organization that had to follow suit off the back of that. So it's bizarre. Like, we cancelled that game. MLR came out with a notice saying that this league was going to be suspended for 30 days off the back of that. Literally 2 days after that, then the season was cancelled. So it was a roller coaster, as I'm sure it was for everyone involved. But frustrating also in the sense that new coaching staff, a pretty exciting roster. It was going to be our first home game. We were building some pretty good momentum coming into that part of the season, and for it to just be, cancelled. And a lot of guys as well that were on their final year of their contracts as well, just having one last opportunity, or maybe an opportunity to put their case forward for seasons ahead, didn't get that. So, really disappointing.
Yeah, no, it was a really, as you say, quite a disappointment, and for fans too. It was, I'll tell you, it was. Let's hope that now. I don't know why the league is starting in March. Maybe they're just using an abundance of caution the end of March, and I don't know if maybe if you as a player, if they've told people if this is a permanent switch or it's just because of the COVID thing, but by moving to late March, they're going to get you guys out of that terrible weather. I mean, Toronto trying to play a game even in April can be dicey at times with the weather. And I've been to games in March at MCU Park with the wind coming off the water there. It's not the most pleasant experience. And of course, you guys are running around in shorts. At least I got a jacket on. So probably from a weather standpoint, it'll be beneficial for the league. Although it kind of puts you up against baseball, but who knows what's going on there with baseball. So
I think just from a player's perspective, it's the right decision in the sense that player welfare's at the forefront of that. The reason they've pushed the season back is so that the teams are able to have a solid pre-season work of training together as squads. I think it's been interesting to see, particularly the NFL now, guys coming back underdone and not physically prepared for the season and getting a lot of soft tissue injuries. So I can't speak for every other team, but our strength and conditioning coach already for Rugby United has done an amazing job getting ahead of that and sending us satellite programming so that by the time we do come back together as a full squad, we've only got a month together where we're doing everything that we need to get ourselves game ready and putting as much as we can on the field on a training practice perspective so that those soft tissue injuries are at least not as prevalent as potentially they could be.
No, that's a great point. I think that's a real challenge, and that was my concern with the NHL when it came back from the hockey league. You can't just rock up and get back on the ice. You got to be in shape. That takes conditioning, and it really doesn't make a difference. And of course, in a contact sport like rugby or football, you really need that stuff, or you're going to wind up with unnecessary injuries, and it could be quite devastating. Could end some careers. So, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. I went to the games at MCU Park, and I have to say, please tell me from a player's perspective. I know that watching the first time I saw Mike Petrie out there after the game, I know he was in pain for several days because of those rug burns from that friggin' artificial turf. He had so many rug burns all over his elbows and his knees. And I noticed the next time he came out, a lot more of the RUNY players would put tape on themselves that didn't do it the first time. So what's that like playing on that? I don't like playing artificial turf. I played American football on artificial turf, and it sucks. I imagine as a rugby player, it's kind of tough.
Yeah, it's me personally, obviously growing up in Australia, I'd never played on artificial turf, and then West Coast of America, it was all grass. So the first experience of that for me was moving over to New York. Some fields are better than others, but MCU Park obviously is dedicated to baseball. So that field surface itself probably isn't aligned with impact and contact sport. A lot of the injuries that we've had in previous years playing at MCU Park have actually been impact surface injuries as opposed to body-to-body contact. So our coaching staff's extremely mindful of how much load we're doing during the week so that we're fresh enough to be able to manage that during the game. But yeah, certainly in those trying conditions, you're going to see a lot more guys wearing like those full length arm compression. But yeah, it's unavoidable essentially. So and both teams have to deal with it. It's just a matter of who can deal with it the best.
Yeah, no, but it's definitely not. I don't think it's desirable. They've got the pro turf, or what do they call that turf, which is actually not as it's a bit more comfortable, but it's
Yeah.
still it's still a weird feeling though. I mean, I playing on that kind of surface. Now RUNY, I think this was kind of a default result going to Coney Island just because they needed some place. But I understand that the team has been looking for another field, and they may have announced that there's well, you guys are going to play somewhere else for the coming season. Have they done that yet, or are we still at MCU Park?
No, I honestly don't know. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that this organization has in terms of trying to manage its facilities and our games. They're extremely transparent with that information with the players, which is amazing. I think they have to be. But right now, my understanding is that they're in negotiation with a handful of parties, and unfortunately, just based on current climate with COVID, there are obviously some restrictions in play that don't allow people to make decisions right now, and it's just navigating that terrain as we move forward. I will say that when we're at Wagner, obviously it's a pain in the ass to get to Staten Island to and from, but the best thing about being out there, which we hadn't had in previous years, is that it's a one-stop shop. We had all our facilities, cafeteria, locker rooms, gym, field, everything there in one place, which is obviously what you're looking for a professional organization to have. So that was probably the best part about last year, and certainly helped us build the momentum that we were needing to go into the season.
No, I think it's a good point, but I have to say this, and I've told James Kennedy this. Obviously, obviously, Rugby United New York is not going to make business decisions based on my needs and desires. But for me to go to a game at MCU Park, it's just under 3 hours for me to get to Manhattan. But to get to MCU Park from where I'm at, it's a 4-hour drive. I have to pay $30 to get across the Verrazano Bridge. I have to fight that traffic, get onto Coney Island, then fight those bizarrely torn up streets out there. And God, they're always tearing up those streets, and you can't figure out how to get to the park half the time. Anyway, and then coming back, it's an overnight in a hotel because I don't dare drive. I don't want to hit a deer at night in Pennsylvania. So it's a hotel stay. It's $50 in tolls, and it's a 4-hour drive each way. So it's a commitment for me to come up there. And when I was still active duty, that was a challenge because I'd have to work on Monday. But now that I'm no longer in active duty, I have my time free, so I can come up there. But if RUNY decides to sign a deal for, I don't know, say playing in New Jersey or something like that, and still call themselves New York, I have no objection to that. I'm just saying. So just putting that out there. So
put it out there.
Just put it out there. But Travis said that he played rugby. It was much more fun than playing football, and it's safer. Yeah, that's. We'll get to the safety thing here in a bit if we get back to it. But yeah, despite the fact you don't wear the kit, the same kind of protective kit, rugby is safer, and they take head injuries much more seriously in rugby. But Travis also said rugby needs cheerleaders. That's where football has rugby beat. Now, I would say that what rugby needs, Travis, is bums in the seats and television coverage. And good news for Major League Rugby is that there was some spotty coverage the first year, but now CBS, ESPN, and someone else has also got, I'm trying to remember what it is, but they've got television contracts, and that's the key. You've got to get television. If you don't have television, you're not going to get viewers. And once you get viewers, and then you get sponsors, and then you can get more seats in the stadiums. Seattle does a great job. The crowds out there are great. They're fantastic. RUNY's crowds were okay, and hopefully they'll get better. A couple of games they were really good. But the thing about rugby in the U.S. is that when you go to rugby games, you have to be careful because fully 1/4 of the audience is usually family of the players, so it's not a true reflection of the interest in the sport. So you got to get more people in the stadium. But how was that for you playing MCU Park? I mean, was the crowd a factor at all to you guys? I mean, we had some decent crowds, 3,500 once or twice, but does that even play a factor? Because I mean, a crowd can play a huge role in games. But what about at MCU Park?
No, certainly. I think you ask any player right now over in the Premiership in the UK, not playing in front of crowds and just seeing the echoes in the stadiums, they'd be lying to you if they said it didn't affect their performance because that's something you're so used to. No, particularly at MCU Stadium, you feel the rise and the rush of the crowd when you've got momentum, and they certainly help spur that on, and it's probably more of an impact on the opposition that you're playing as well. So without a doubt, the crowd atmosphere plays a major role in any team's performance, particularly at home grounds. I mean, just go and ask Seattle Seawolves what it's like to play there in front of a home crowd. They're unbelievable. So that's why it's so hard to play and win a game there.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. Well, You know, it's interesting because Toronto came in the league, and we didn't have New England. New England came this past season. So did DC Glory. They came the previous year, but they just played exhibition games. I went to those games. This year they're up. So DC is there, and New England's there, and we now got two conferences in Major League Rugby for the first time. So that's pretty exciting. And what about regional rivalries? I mean, I don't know that you have one already with New England or with DC, or that's going to develop, but for me, watching the games, it seemed like there might be sort of some rivalry already developing with Toronto. I mean, those were tougher games than I expected. I mean, I went to a game there in 2019 at MCU Park with the Arrows, and watching you guys recycle the ball about 97 times trying to cross the try line from about 2 meters out. I was sitting 20 feet away at the end of the pitch taking pitch. I was exhausted just watching all the recycling because Toronto just would not let that try, and guys kept trying. Eventually, RUNY got the try, but man, is there a budding rivalry with any teams? Maybe Toronto, maybe someone else, or is it just too soon to say that in Major League Rugby?
No, I mean, the obvious ones, just from a geographical standpoint, Boston and New York have always got a history, and I think you'd be crazy if your marketing team wasn't playing up to those rivalries as well, for the obvious reasons. We've only played Boston once in the official game, and they absolutely towed us up. But unfortunately, it was down in Las Vegas, so you really didn't get the atmosphere of our other home games for that one. I think diving deeper into it, our biggest rivalries from a conference perspective is definitely the Toronto. Every time we play against them, it's a tough game, and we're 1-for-1. I think last year, ironically, both games we won our home games, but the one at the end of the year, I think it was a semi-final maybe that they beat us to go into finals contention up there, went down to the wire, which both games have. So I think naturally from a performance perspective, it's the Toronto games, but I'm sure once we start to play Boston and DC, 3 times a season, which we will this year, there's certainly going to be some clashes for sure.
Now you've played alongside some. I mean, for those who are true rugby fans, some well-known names. Maybe not just household names around the world, but for those of us who are USA Rugby fans, of course, you play with Peaches, who's known effectively as Peaches, Mike Petrie. We won't get into why he's called Peaches, but Mike Petrie, who's played for the Eagles, he's played for New York, he's played for RUNY. Ben Foden from England, who came over to New York and was a massive celebrity in England, of course. Not so well known here, but he's a top player as well. Then you had on loan last year, Road, unfortunately just a few games before the season ended. Cathal Marsh from Ireland. What's it like playing along? I mean, this is a pretty, I think, interesting mix of players from around the world that RUNY has had the past season. What was that like?
Yeah, interesting. It was obviously it's great to get those guys' experiences and their input into the team is invaluable, particularly for the domestic players here that probably haven't been exposed to that level of rugby or playing professionalism before. I think something that probably took me about a year to kind of dial into was just how unique it was for us as a squad to have so many different cultural playing styles and approaches towards rugby from all parts of the world come together at once. I think any team that has an identity or has an established professional program, majority of that team have an understanding and buy-in in terms of that team's ethos, culture, values, all the way that they play, so that individual that comes into it understands and knows those values and culture set points, I guess, that they're buying into. Where for us in our first year in particular, you had guys from Ireland, all parts of America, England, Australia. There was a lot of different cultural ideas to bring into the table. So figuring out which worked best collectively, but also trying to get the best out of individuals within that environment as well to play their best. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges we've had over the first 2 years. And this third season, we were really starting to, dial in our identity as a squad, driven by our coaching staff as well, that were very much player centric with our decision making, which is a massive thing. So it was huge. And I think, you mentioned guys like Cathal Marsh and Bastareaud and Foden, those guys that have had that international and professional experience before, and what they brought to the table for the wider squad was invaluable. And just the little things around training that you probably just don't know or aware of that you're doing at the time. massive. So
now, the game itself, the league, of course, is new. It's 3 seasons now. We're going to start the 4th season in March. Thank goodness. Looking forward to that. But we're not talking about the kind of remuneration that folks can make playing in Japan or in the Premier League or in the Guinness League, the Guinness Sponsor League, I should say, or the French League. But obviously, it's probably a challenge for folks to, without getting into what salaries are in Major League Rugby, a challenge, and a number of players supplement their income or actually have a day job, so to speak, and do other things. Now, one thing I noticed is that if it predates this, I missed it, but you've been doing some work in broadcasting, either in podcast or since the lockdown has started. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is that something that started during lockdown, or is it before that? And where are you going to go with that?
Yeah, so started a little podcast at the start of basically the MLR season, February. Big fan of podcasts, whether it be education, learning, or just talk shows. I love the idea of long form, open conversation. And I think my experience within rugby and rugby media specifically is that you only get a very narrow view or perspective from a player, whether it be those short media snippets. Rugby players historically are pretty humble individuals and closed off individuals when it comes to those sort of snippets. So to be able to just create a long form podcast and talking to players from around the league and other competitions as well, and just hearing their experiences and pathways into professional rugby has been massive. So certainly not as lucrative as it may look or sound at the moment, but that was never the intent. It was always just to literally gain knowledge and insight into these players and how unique everyone's pathway into professional rugby. And I will say the feedback that we've got since starting, I think we've done 21 episodes this year, hitting all 4 corners of the globe, has been awesome. Just hearing, players reach out and saying that they've had similar experiences, and hearing from the players on the podcasts, just little details around their stuff has helped them. So, yeah, it's been great. I love it.
No, it's amazing. I was curious where you're going with it. You're right. It's those things. Some people think that they're lucrative. They're not necessarily. One of the reasons why I started a segment on my channel called Rugby Ascendant is to promote the game. I've gone out of my way for a long time to try to promote the game every way I possibly can on social media, to people I know around the world, just to get support for, particularly here in the U.S., to help get it going. So I'm a huge fan of the game, enjoy playing it, and enjoy watching it, probably even more at this stage. But you're right. It's fascinating. Now, so when I think of rugby podcast now, I mean, honestly, these are the 3 that come to the top of my mind. There's others out there, but of course I think of Donald Stanford's podcast. He's got it going. I think of Nigel Owens. Of course, Nigel's got some great stuff. And I think of yours. They're all really, really good quality stuff. And I think it helps promote the game, and that's a great reason to do it. But maybe, what are you thinking about? Have you ever considered going into broadcasting potentially, maybe after rugby down the road? I'm not trying to rush your rugby career along here. We hope you're there for a while, but maybe post that. I mean, have you got any experience? Have you dabbled in broadcasting at all?
Haven't dabbled in it whatsoever. I certainly not shy to talk, and probably detriment in the past, but I'm certainly open to it. It's certainly nothing that I've put serious thought to just yet. I think that decision's probably going to be made once I finish playing, but for the time being, I'm certainly appreciating and valuing these podcasts and just having these conversations with players from around the globe. And if I can help guys get their stories out and their experiences to other players, it's only going to be at the benefit of the next generation of player coming through to learn the nuances of how to navigate professional rugby. So, that's been the best part about it so far.
Well, you hit on something that I tell people all the time who aren't familiar with the sport of rugby that's really important to understand. Well, first off, and it may have something to do with the nature of the game. I think that's part of it, but it also might have to do something with the fact, to be honest, that rugby as a professional sport only goes back to about 1995, 96. It's relatively recent, unlike baseball and football and tennis and golf, which have been professional for over a century in those cases. But rugby players, I mean, almost to man and woman, in my experience, are humble. It doesn't matter how big a celebrity they are in the game. You can have a conversation with them. I mean, Perry Baker, you can walk right up to Perry Baker. He'll talk to anybody. He's friendly. He's easy to get along with. I've never met Ben Foden, but I hear the same thing about Ben Foden, that he's easy to talk to. And Dan Norton, I've heard that. But, Werner Kok for South Africa, easy guy to talk to. Mike Petrie. When I went to that first game up there in New York, I came down to the pitch after the game to congratulate all the players, and Mike was down there, and I started talking to him, and I mentioned that I'd driven 4 hours to come to the game. He put that all over social media and said, "Man, we got fans coming from 4 hours away to come watch us. How cool is this?" That was kind of nice. But rugby players, by and large, are humble. Even the biggest celebrity, Brian Habana, he's a big celebrity, and people can talk to him. And that's one of the things I really like about the game is humility of rugby players. We're not talking about people in sports like soccer, football, who are drug addicts and cocaine and parties and blowing money here and there. Maybe that's because rugby players don't have that money to blow. I don't know. It could be the reason. But seriously, I mean, what's that?
No comment.
No comment. Yeah. But no, seriously. Of course, we know. And the other thing I like about the game, and you make a comment on this if you don't mind, very quickly before we wrap up, is that I was first introduced to the game as a freshman at university, at Ohio University. They had a club team there. And the guy came to me on Friday and said, "Hey, you're going to come to the game tonight?" I'm like, "Game's tomorrow." He's, "No, not football. I'm talking about rugby." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm from Appalachia. We're happy to see electricity and paved roads. I've never seen a rugby game." He goes, "Oh, you'll love it." And I said, "Okay, I'd heard of it, but I'd never seen it." So I went to the game, and we're standing, in touch and just watching it go back and forth. I'm like, "It's not Australian rules football. It's not football. It's not." It's cool. I don't know what it is, but it's cool. And what I noticed is that the one team got I don't remember who, but they just got slaughtered. It must have been like 63-0 or something like that. But after the game, everybody's just hanging out, having a beer, chilling, relaxing. There's no animosity. Everyone gets along. There's no taunting. Aha, none of this nonsense. I mean, that's what I love about rugby. And that's, what are your thoughts? You agree? I mean, that's kind of the cool aspects of rugby, is the humility and also that people just get along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think rugby as a sport is still a pretty small community wherever you go. So I think that's obviously in the back of people's minds, that they don't want to upset someone knowing they're probably going to see them at the bar later or something like that. But I think just having that mutual respect for each other before and after a game, regardless of results or what happens on the pitch, is something that is a massive attribute towards the game of rugby that other sports certainly could learn from. I'm coaching some youth high school rugby over here in New York as well, and just the difference in terms of the football approach, kill your rivalry at all costs and all these things, and explaining to the boys after a game of rugby to go and shake hands with the opposition and go and get to know your opposition team players is just such a foreign concept, but they appreciate it so much. So it's massive. It's a massive draw card, and I think something that certainly resonates to new fans.
Now, are you talking about Fordham Prep? Are you still the director of rugby there?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's pretty awesome. That's got to be a rewarding experience for you too, because you're paying it back.
I mean, some of the biggest mentors in my life have always been my high school and youth coaches, and the value that I gained from those guys was huge. So if I can give that back in any small way possible, then it's certainly something that I appreciate.
Well, let me get a couple comments in here from the chat from folks. The Dodgy Idealist says, "All right, boys and girls, and the handsome two men." We won't let that go to our heads, Harry, will we? But Dodgy Idealist head out for a meeting. Rudolph Kitching says, "Good luck, Harry, competing in a tough game. If more people realize how interesting rugby is, you can bring it to them." Well, yeah, I agree with that. And then Leanne Prentice says, "Rugby is such an awesome sport. The vibe and love that brings the world together." Well, the World Rugby, of course, I'm not a big fan of that title. They should have left it the International Rugby Board, but that's just my position. But of course, their theme for a long time has been the World in Union. And I'm not a kind of a kumbaya kind of person, but that's a good theme for rugby, because it really is the World in Union. People come together from all over the world and they play. I mean, look at Rugby United New York. All these different players from all over the world, and you guys, from the moment you hit the pitch, were a competitive team. That was exciting. Now, it was hard enough for me to stomach admitting that I was a fan of a New York sports franchise. I mean, I'm from Baltimore originally, so that would get me beat up if I went home. But that was hard. But the fact that RUNY came out of the gate and was competitive, I was like, oh, okay, I can easily be a fan of this team. So pretty cool. But let me ask you this one, Harry, before we go. What do you miss from home? What do you miss from Australia that you don't get? And I know it's not Vegemite, because that's a craft product. It's not even Australian. They made that stuff up.
Well, right now, I'd say summer.
Oh, there you go, because it is summer in the Southern Hemisphere.
It's summer in the Southern Hemisphere right now, so I'm looking on social media and all my friends and family back home are heading to the beach, and I'm rugged up inside my studio apartment in New York watching it rain here. So that's the obvious answer. I think obviously right now with COVID and everything that's going on, family's a massive one for me. I haven't been home for over 12 months now, and I had plans to be back there for holidays. But as we touched on off air as well, it's just impossible to do that at the moment. So, yeah, I'd say they're the biggest things, just being so far away. That's probably the hardest thing. But, you know, I'm not going to write a song about it. It's something that you deal with and something that you put up with, and that's the reason I'm living in New York. So, yeah, all good.
Well, and there you mentioned on something we should touch on. You know, while I joke about New York, and I do a lot, but it is a city like no other in the world. I mean, the closest I've found in New York with the same sort of vibe is maybe Tokyo from a standpoint of physical look, you know, with the architecture, but not the same sort of vibe. Tokyo doesn't have the same sort of vibe, but there's no city like it in the world. I mean, London is completely different. Paris is completely different. New York is unique. It has its own unique vibe, and this has been a really difficult year. So let's take 2020 out of the equation. Okay, we can't. This year doesn't count. It's a disaster. What is the thing that you enjoy the most, that you really like about being in New York? Because there's a lot of things to like.
Yeah. The hustle mentality. It's such a cliche, but it's for the right reason. I think if you're willing to graft and grind in this city, it rewards you in so many ways. And I just love that you can walk out your door at any moment, any time of the day, any day of the week, and there's going to be a new and exciting experience waiting for you. So it's certainly the city that never sleeps, but if you can deal with that, it's pretty amazing to be a part of.
Actually, that's a fantastic comment. It's a similar thought that I have. Every time I'm in New York, when I walk out of wherever I'm at, in a hotel, of course, and I walk out, I never know what's going to happen. I mean, I may have a plan, agenda, I may be going someplace, but you never know what you're going to see on the streets of New York or what you're going to experience. And that's what makes it kind of interesting. It's a fascinating place. So let me ask you this, Harry. Anything you'd like to share with us before we go? And before you answer, I want to thank you for coming on, and I'll thank you after you go off. But and wish you the best of luck. I'm looking forward to this season. If I get up there, whether it's at Coney Island, or if they find another location, I'll definitely get up there. We'll try maybe get some photo ops, and maybe I can interview you up there after a game or something like that. But so I'm looking forward to that. So I'll thank you for that. But I just want to say that. It's awesome to get an Australian on the channel. It's rare. There's so few of you. No, just kidding. But any last thoughts? Anything you'd like to leave us with, just about life in general, about your experiences, about rugby, just anything, or Christmas greetings, anything you want to say before we close out?
No, I just think certainly appreciate you spreading the word of rugby around the US. I think the more people that can do this and create platforms for people to express themselves and their interest in the sport, it's only going to grow the game. And grassroots is where it needs to happen for this game to thrive over here in the US. I think from a player's perspective, I think particularly back home in Australia, for anyone that's been watching, it's it's tough on the players just knowing the success or the lack of that they've had over the last couple of years. But, put yourself in the shoes of the players and understand that they're going out there to do the best job they possibly can every day and every time they're competing. It's not intentional that their performances are lackluster or whatever it is. And I think there was a great comment from, a podcast over in the UK with Jamie Roberts and Jamie Heaslip as well, as trust the process and trust that the players are trying to do the best they can for the supporters. So stick by us and we'll do our very best to make sure that we're putting a product on the field that's entertaining and something that you aspire to. So thanks very much.
No, it's brilliant. Thank you so much. It reminds me, I forgot about it. Jamie Roberts, Jimmy Haslett. I think they also have a podcast, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually pretty good too. But I'll keep that at number 4. We won't put that in the top 3 with you.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the channel. You're welcome back at any time. We'll try and get you back on here if you're interested at some point in the future. Excuse me. Maybe once the season gets started and we can look forward to the 2021 season. So it's not that far away. I mean, I'm not good at math, but I think it's about 14 weeks from now is when the first game is. So if the first game is 14 weeks, then I'm guessing that physio and workouts and training begins probably in the next 4 weeks or 5 weeks, maybe. Is that about right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, we're doing our satellite stuff individually at the moment. So we'll come back together as a squad in a new year and put together a pretty solid 6 to 4 weeks. So anyone that knows preseason rugby knows that that's probably harder than the competition itself. So guys better be ready.
Yeah, and it's also the time you're probably most worried about injuries and because players aren't used to being, you're not in sync from having worked together. I mean, when you play all the time, you know where Mike Petrie's going to be when he gets that ball, and so you know where to get to. But when you're not playing together all the time, that's kind of rusty, and you got bad passes, and people get hits they probably shouldn't have got because they're not in the right position. So yeah, you're right. Preseason is probably tough, but 13 teams this year, 18 weeks. The season starts on the 20th of March, 2021, going to the 1st of August. 2 conferences. We've got lots of teams on the East Coast now, which we didn't have at the start of this league. I became a Utah fan because there was nothing here for me. So nothing against the Warriors, but I had to pick a team, so I picked the Warriors. And then RUNY came along, so I picked RUNY. Anyway, so my guest, Harry Bennett, it's a pleasure having you on. Merry Christmas to you and to your family, and best of luck in this season.
No, appreciate it. Thanks very much for having me.
No worries. If you don't mind, send me the link. Because I'm not sure how to get to it, because I find your podcast through YouTube or through LinkedIn all the time. If it has its own site that's at or someplace you can get to it, if you could send me on LinkedIn a link to that so I can post it in this video so people can get to your podcast, and maybe we can help drive some more folks to your audience. So if you could send that to me in LinkedIn, then we'll take care of that. Okay.
Will do.
All right, that's it. That's Harry Bennett. Thanks a lot. I'll let you exit the stream there on your own, and then I will close out the show. All right, awesome. Well, folks, how cool was that? That was absolutely brilliant, was it not? Let me just get down here. Okay, so all participants, there we go. All right, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Wow, that was pretty awesome. Well, at least for me, I enjoyed it. And in case you're wondering, yes, I am wearing a rugby jersey, as I always do. Rugby United New York. Whoops, got my microphone caught here. There you go. This is the road jersey from last season. Pretty cool. Major League Rugby right there on the sleeve. MLR. That's the sport we're talking about. And what I didn't know about Harry, I learned in this broadcast, was that he played in pro rugby for Sacramento. That was news to me. Pretty exciting. Hadn't known that, so it was kind of cool. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And that's really what these interviews are. They're more of a conversation than an interview. Fantastic guy. Really, you got to respect Harry's perseverance. I mean, 4 shoulder surgeries. Ouch. That's got to suck. That's got to hurt. And he didn't give up on the game. And here he is playing professionally here in the U.S., and that's really awesome. And it's great to see him on the team. We have a multinational team in New York, as I mentioned, Irish, English, French, American, Australian players. Pretty cool stuff. I don't think there's South Africans for RUNY, but there are South Africans in Major League Rugby. So there you go, folks. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I will be on Ronaldo host program tonight. It'll be Wednesdays with the Colonel, whatever we're calling that program. This will be the premiere of it. We weren't sure we were doing it because Ronaldo is dealing with all kinds of political nonsense in Nelson Mandela Bay, where he is a ward counselor, for those of you who know that. So they've had some pretty exciting times in the town council meetings there this week in Nelson Mandela Bay. And exciting, I think, is an understatement. So we weren't sure if he was going to be available, but he will be available. So about 50 minutes from now, I'll be on the program with Ronaldo. That's you can find it by looking under his channel. Join us for a conversation. We'll be talking about political events in South Africa, in the United States, and just talking about things in general. This will be a weekly feature now. That's the plan, unless Ronaldo changes his mind, is unhappy with the viewership. I don't draw enough people to the channel. Just kidding. But, well, maybe I'm not kidding. We'll see. But anyway, we'll see what happens, folks. Thanks for tuning in. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you this. If you're not getting notifications about the streams, my apologies, but I have no control over that. That's YouTube. YouTube is doing some strange things, which I've complained about in the past. I'm not the only content creator that complains about this. For instance, yet another regular viewer of my program, somebody that watches this program every single day and is a moderator, was unsubscribed. I had 2 other people who tuned in for my premiere this morning on my video about South Africa's new airline, Lyft, and they said, I didn't get notifications for this, and I was unsubscribed. I didn't unsubscribe you. That's YouTube doing it, folks. If you have content that you value, that you like, that's on YouTube, you've got to periodically go back and make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. If you're not getting any notifications, then make sure you have the app installed on your mobile device, because they're not sending emails out anymore to people to warn you about notifications. It's primarily done through the app. So if you don't have the app on your phone and notifications turned on, then you may not find out about people's live streams. But for my live stream, for the duration of the lockdown, except when I'm traveling, and next week because of my mother's funeral service, I will be traveling late next week. But when I'm around, I do 2 streams every day. It's 11 a.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. in Botswana, South Africa, and then at 2:30 Eastern and 2:35 Eastern, 9:35 Botswana and South Africa. So every day in South Africa at 6 p.m. and at 9:30 p.m. here in the East Coast, 11 a.m. and 2:30 in the afternoon. Every single day, 7 days a week, I broadcast. In case you're not aware of that. So if you want to catch those things, you just tune in for it. There you go. Don't worry about the notifications. Just check it out. But YouTube unsubscribes people. I have no idea why they're doing this. It's not fair to people who use the channel, and it's certainly not fair to content creators. I understand why people lose interest in channels, and that's fine. But I was just watching this morning, my subscriber base declined by 12 people this morning. I find it hard to believe that I've done content that has irritated 12 people this morning, or they no longer found interesting or compelling in just 1 hour. That's a strange thing to happen. Let me look and see if it's declined even further. No, it's still at the same number. Anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in. Catch me in 50 minutes from now on Ronaldo Khul's program in South Africa. Look forward to it. Leon gets all the notifications. Well, you're one of the few. I don't even get all the notifications from my programs. So Hendo has just put up a link. I think that link is to Ronaldo. What I learned is not that all Aussies are grumpy. Oh, no, who thought Aussies are grumpy? I've never met grumpy Australians. I've had a lot of fun with Australians over the year. What was a great... Oh, Ronald Guns says it was a great conversation. Determined young man. He is. Very impressive. And I'm going to make sure I get that link in so you can check out his excuse me, his podcast. I can't get the word out. Yeah, his podcasts are very interesting. He's had some fantastic guests on, so I'm going to make sure you guys get that. We'll get it in the video description. Thanks a lot. We'll catch you in less than an hour on Ronaldo's program, folks. God bless. Have a good day. And my many, many thanks to Harry Bennett. Fantastic guest, very, very appealing personality, and really enjoyed him being on the program. Thanks a lot, Harry. And we'll catch you for the Night Owls edition this evening at 9:35 South Africa, Botswana time, 2:35 Eastern here in the U.S. for Night Owls. In the meantime, I'll be on Ronaldo's program here shortly. So thanks a lot, folks. God bless and have a good day. And thank you, Harry Bennett.